Blackberry Fish Cakes by John Escott. When Patsy's mum and dad took over Crab Cove's fish and chip shop, they took over macaw as well. Patsy, who had always wanted a pet bird, thought macaw was beautiful, with his red, yellow and blue wings and his red breast. Unfortunately, her mother did not think macaw was quite so lovely. "I'd have thought twice about coming if I'd have known that bird was here," Mrs. Forum said. "I'm sure it will cost us a fortune to keep." Macaw had been left behind by the old owner of the shop because he was going into a rest home and couldn't take his bird with him. Rest homes had strict rules about such things. "Isn't there a tropical bird garden we can give him to?" Mrs. Forum wondered. "Squaw!" screamed Macaw. "I don't think he likes that idea," Mr. Forum told his wife. "Nor do I," said Patsy, pulling a face. So Macaw stayed, which pleased Patsy very much, and things went quite smoothly until the day of the Crab Cove Hospital fete. The fete began in the morning and went on all day. Patsy's mum was helping out on Mrs. Hatwhistle's stool. Patsy and Macaw had gone along as well. Macaw was perched in his favourite spot on Patsy's mop of red hair. "Yark!" he screeched at passers-by, but in a friendly way. Mrs. Hatwhistle's stall was full of goodies: homemade wine, homemade jam, cakes and biscuits. "Everything looks lovely, Mrs. Hatwhistle," said Patsy. "Hatwhistle?" screamed Macaw. "Really, Patsy," said Mrs. Forum, looking embarrassed, "you must teach that bird some manners." "Sorry, Mrs. Hatwhistle," said Patsy. "Bless me, dear, I don't mind," laughed Mrs. Hatwhistle. "I think Macaw is a scream." "Scream?" screamed Macaw. "We'll have a look around and come back later," said Patsy. Now, at this time, out in the middle of Crab Bay, there was a large white luxury yacht. It belonged to Mr. Hiram J. Beefy, the American beef burger millionaire. He owned burger bars all over America and was shaped a bit like a beef burger himself. Mr. Beefy and his wife Lydia were on a world cruise. "What a darling little place," Mrs. Beefy said when she saw Crab Cove. She was as thin as a stick insect, which made people laugh when they heard her married name. Hiram J. sighed. "Yes, honey." He was getting bored with cruising. Getting ideas to improve his burger bars was what interested him, and he didn't think Crab Cove would provide him with any of those. But he was wrong. Back at the fete, Macaw had taken off from Patsy's hair, which he had got into the habit of using as a landing pad, and flown over to Mrs. Hatwhistle's stall again. He seemed especially interested in a bottle of wine that hung in a basket under the canopy of the stall. "Blackberry wine, only £1.50, it said on the label. "Squaw," said Macaw, and he picked up the basket by the handle and flew off with it over the heads of the crowd. "Macaw!" cried Mrs. Forum. "Bring that back at once." Macaw didn't even look around. A few minutes later, when Patsy arrived back carrying a large chocolate ice cream, she could see something was wrong by the look on her mother's face. "Where's Macaw?" she said. "That bird!" shouted Mrs. Forum. In fact, Macaw had taken his prize home. He flew into the kitchen at the back of Forum's fish parlour and perched on a shelf above the worktop. Then, slowly, he pecked the cork from the bottle of wine, the neck hanging over the edge of the shelf, and the wine poured steadily downward, straight into a large bowl which stood on the worktop. In the bowl was a fishy mixture. Macaw lost interest in the bottle of wine after it had stopped gurgling, and flew out of the window in search of some new adventure. The fishy mixture gradually changed colour. Several minutes later, Mr. Forum returned to his kitchen after answering the phone. "Now, what was I doing?" he said to himself. "Ah, yes, the fish cake mix," and he went over to the large bowl on the worktop and began stirring it. He didn't notice that the fish cake mix had more of a pinky tinge to it now. Out on Hiram J. Beefy's yacht, the millionaire and his wife were having a late breakfast. Mrs. Beefy was eating a grapefruit, while her husband tucked into a king-size beef burger of the sort that had made him his fortune. Suddenly, there was a flapping sound, and they both turned to see Macaw landing on the rail of the yacht. "Look, honey," said Hiram J., "it's a macaw." Lydia looked tickled pink. "I wonder if it talks," she said. She didn't have to wonder long. "Pie and chips, chicken and chips, pea fritters, fish cakes, pass the vinegar," screamed Macaw. Hiram J. stared in astonishment. "Did you hear that, Lydia? He's telling you what is on the menu at some restaurant. Now that's what I call smart. A flying advertisement." "Where's the salt?" shrieked Macaw, and flew off towards Crab Cove. Hiram J. Beefy forgot about his breakfast. "I have to find out where he's going. I've never tasted a pea fritter. Who knows, maybe it's something I can introduce into the burger bars." And he called for one of his crew to launch the small boat. Patsy had arrived back at the shop in time for the midday opening. Because Mrs. Forum was staying at the fete, Patsy was to act as waitress at the 4 tables in Forum's fish parlour, but she was worried about Macaw. Patsy told her father what the bird had done at the fete. "Dear me," was all that Mr. Forum said. At that moment, Macaw flew past the window and perched on the hanging sign outside the shop. "There he is," cried Patsy. "He's not carrying any bottles of wine," Mr. Forum observed. "Oh dear," said Patsy, "I wonder what he's done with it." Just then, a large man in expensive yachting clothes came into the shop and collapsed into a chair at one of the tables. He had obviously been running. "Is that your bird?" he gasped, nodding to Macaw outside. Yes," Patsy admitted, wondering what Macaw had been up to now, but the man just gave a nod and said, "Good." Without looking at the menu, he said, "I'll have 2 pea fritters, 2 fish cakes and some chips, please." "Yes, sir," said Patsy, one eye on Macaw. "Yes, sir," said Macaw through the open window. The American stayed right through lunchtime. He ate what he had ordered, then he asked Patsy to bring him some more of those delicious fish cakes. "He's got an enormous appetite," Patsy whispered to her father. "He's very strange," said Mr. Forum, "but several customers have come back for more fish cakes today. They're all saying how nice they are. It's a good job I made an extra large helping of mixture." It was much later, when Patsy was busy clearing up in the kitchen, that she glanced up and saw the empty wine bottle on the shelf. "So that's where it got to," she said. Then she noticed the empty bowl on the worktop beneath it. "Oh my goodness. Dad," she called. Mr. Forum came into the kitchen. Your fish cakes," she said. "Did you mix them in that?" Patsy nodded to the bowl beneath the empty wine bottle. "Yes," said Mr. Forum. "Why?" Patsy pointed to the empty wine bottle. "I think you had something extra in today's mix." Mr. Forum looked up at the bottle. "Whatever?" "Mrs. Hatwhistle's blackberry wine," said Patsy. "Oh," said Mr. Forum. Later, when the shop was closing for the afternoon, Hiram J. Beefy went over to the counter to speak to Mr. Forum and Patsy. "Sir," he said, "I'd like to congratulate you on a most original dish." "You would?" said Mr. Forum, looking surprised. The American nodded. "I'm talking about your fish cakes. I've never tasted anything like them before. You must have your own special recipe." "Well," began Mr. Forum. Hiram J. held up a hand. "Now, I don't expect you to tell me your recipe for nothing. What do you say to $1,000? Mr. Forum blinked in astonishment. Patsy's mouth fell open. "Oh, well, really, I couldn't," Mr. Forum began. "Nonsense," said Hiram J. "I insist on paying you something. I want to make and sell them in my burger bars in America." But it was an accident," said Mr. Forum. Now it was Hiram J. Beefy's turn to look surprised. "Accident?" Mr. Forum explained about Macaw and the bottle of wine. "And so what you had this morning," he finished, "were blackberry fish cakes, a sort of freak fish cake." Hiram J. began to laugh. "Let's get this straight," he chuckled. "It's a normal fish cake mix, plus 1 bottle of blackberry wine." And he laughed and laughed. Patsy and Mr. Forum laughed with him. In the end, because Mr. Forum wouldn't take any money, the millionaire made a generous donation to the hospital fate fund, and Mr. Forum told him how to make pea fritters, free of charge, so Hiram J. Beefy went away a very happy man. "Wait until we tell Mum," said Patsy, after the American had gone. "She'll have to let Macaw stay now. Blackberry fish cakes could make us millionaires like Mr. Beefy." "Well, we've already sold more than 3 times the number we usually do," he agreed. "We must tell Mrs. Hatwhistle. After all, it was her blackberry wine that did the trick. We'll have to go into business together. The Hatwhistle and Forum Blackberry Fish Cake Company." Mr. Forum laughed. "Blackberry fish cakes?" screamed Macaw, automatically adding an extra item to his squawk-aloud menu. "Blackberry fish cakes!" And after that day, they became a regular feature at Forum's Fish Parlour. And here's a second, slightly shorter story, called Trouble in the Supermarket by Margaret Mahay. One day, when he was in a very jokey mood, Mr. Delmonico offended a word witch. He did it by being a bit too clever. Too much cleverness is often offensive to witches. Mr. Delmonico, with his twins, Francis and Sarah, were shopping at the supermarket. The witch was there too, pushing a shopping trolley and talking to herself, as word witches do. They need a lot of words going on around them all the time. "I'll have some peanut butter," she said. "You'd butter not," cried Mr. Delmonico, laughing at his own joke. The word witch took no notice, just went on talking to herself. "And then perhaps I'll have a loaf of wholemeal bread," she went on. Mr. Delmonico winked at the twins. "How can you make a meal out of a hole?" he asked. "It doesn't sound very nice." Francis and Sarah were horrified to hear their father speaking so carelessly to a word witch. But the witch ignored him. She was trying hard to behave well in a public place. I'll get some beans, she muttered. Mr. Delmonico looked at the beans. He couldn't resist another joke. They look more like might have beans, he remarked with a smile. Now the witch turned on him, glaring with her small red eyes. I've had quite enough of you, she cried. You shall suffer from whirling words and see how you like it. Mr. Delmonico was suddenly serious as the word witch scuttled away. Whirling words sounded as if it might be painful. I'm afraid I might have got us into a bit of a jam, he said to the twins. Daddy, be careful, cried Sarah, but it was too late. They were up to their ankles in several kinds of jam. Francis was mainly mixed up with strawberry, Sarah with plum and apple, while Mr. Delmonico himself had melon and ginger jam up over the turn-ups of his trousers. The manager of the supermarket came hurrying up. What's going on here? He cried. Nothing really, Mr. Delmonico said, trying to sound casual. Just some jam that was lying around. There's something fishy about this, declared the manager, and then gasped, for a large flapping fish had appeared out of nowhere and struck him on the right ear. Sarah and Francis realised that anyone near Mr. Delmonico was going to suffer from whirling words too. You are to blame for all this mess, said the manager, and you'll have to pay for it. Oh, will I? Replied Mr. Delmonico, trying hard to keep calm. Wait till I ring my lawyer. An elegant gold ring with an enormous diamond in it appeared in his hand. Mr. Delmonico looked guiltily and tried to hide it behind the bottles of vinegar. You can do what you like, you'll have to pay, said the manager. Me? Pay? Look at my trousers all over jam. I shall lose my temper in a moment. You're just egging me on. Eggs began to fall out of the air. A few of them hit the supermarket manager, but most of them broke on Mr. Delmonico. He was jammed to the knees and egg to the ears. Stop it, cried the manager. And you talk of lawyers. Why, you haven't got a leg to stand on. Mr. Delmonico sat down suddenly in the jam. We must get out of this before the balloon goes up, whispered Francis to Sarah, and he found himself rising out of the jam, Sarah beside him. To their delight, a beautiful air balloon was carrying them gently away. Quick, said Francis, grab Dad. Catching Mr. Delmonico by the collar and by the belt of his trousers, his clever twins hoisted him into the air. The manager waved his fist at them and shouted, You haven't heard the last of this. The balloon swooped through the supermarket door and skimmed over the roofs of the town. Home, ordered Mr. Delmonico. I'm not going to that shop again. They have a very funny way of displaying fish and jam. Francis shook his head. You shouldn't have teased the word witch, Dad. Oh, these word witches need to be teased, Mr. Delmonico replied grandly. Wispy creatures with their heads in the clouds, whereas I am a pretty down-to-earth fellow. At that moment, Mr. Delmonico's collar and trouser belt gave way and he fell to earth, fortunately into his very own garden, which he had dug and raked that morning until it was as soft as velvet. We're home, said Francis, but the whirling words are still with us. What will we do about that?